Wonderful to see everyone. My name is Shen. I'm a journalist and a startup advisor, and I spent the first half of my career in the UN and the World Bank. I would like to introduce Tessa Lau, CTO and Chief Robot Whisperer at Savioke. April Webster, a software engineer for IBM Watson. Ioana Cozmuta, who is the Space Portal Lead at NASA, and Cather Simpson, the CSO of Engender Tech. As you know, the panel is obviously addressing how global technology can be used to solve some of the world's greatest, most pressing issues at the moment. And so I'm going to have each of the panelists actually talk a little bit about the work and what they're observing in the industry. Obviously kicking it off with Robotics, a great startup robotic company working on lots of interesting stuff. What are you working on?
Okay, well, I'll start a little bit with my background. I finished my PhD in computer science, and I went to IBM for 11 years, and I was working on software automation. And after 11 years of that, I kind of had enough, and I was looking for something different to work on, and I started looking at robotics. And the reason why was because Steve Cousins, who was my manager at IBM, had gone to start up this company called Willow Garage. And one of the projects that was going on at Willow at the time was called Robots for Humanity. And it was really about helping quadriplegics and other people with disabilities actually be able to do things for themselves in their homes with the help of robotics. And so after working on software for so long, I thought, oh my God, robots and computers and science and technology can actually have an impact on people's lives. And that was how I got into robotics. That was about, I guess, 5 years now. So, I think robots have this enormous potential to actually change the world and create an impact on our lives. What I love about them is that they're physical. They actually move around in human spaces and they touch you. They touch your lives. You can touch them, and they can actually have, affect change in the world that I could never actually create through my software. So that's why I'm super excited to be working in robotics. What we're doing now at Savioke, we're a startup. We're about 3.5 years old at this point. Our first product, Relay, is a delivery robot. He lives in hotels, and he brings room service up to guest rooms.
That's a major global problem.
He's super cute. Well, we have to solve the cuteness first, then we'll solve the world problems.
That's important, though.
It is super important.
People to accept the robot.
Well,
it needs to be cute and friendly.
I mean, one of the challenges that we had launching a robot into the world was that, people are very scared of change and of new technology and of robots taking jobs and all of those things. And so our robot is cute partly as a defense mechanism because it makes him more accepted. People love it. I have kids walking up to it and hugging it all the time. So I know.
And less likely to put it in a trash can?
Less likely to put it in a trash can, less likely to kick it or beat it up or do anything bad to it. So, that was part of our design, was actually, looking at how do we actually make this more successful in the world, and being cute is a part of that. So my role there, I'm one of the founders and currently CTO. Also leading the field operations team. And one of our challenges is looking at how do we get robots out into the world so that they can really start impacting everyone's lives, not just the people who are staying in hotels who are lucky enough to experience Relay right now. And bringing it back to the theme of this panel, one of the other goals that we have for Savioke is to look at how robots are going to be helping people, not just through the deliveries, which are our first step, but through things like elder care or being able to do jobs that no one else wants to do, and offloading that work off of people who aren't, really happy with their environment. So I'll let the other panelists introduce themselves.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious now because I hear you talk about deliveries and so on, and I wonder. I've seen so many times when a person delivers something and the customer at the other end is unhappy, they can be very rude to that person. Have you seen a change just because it's a robot?
You know, pretty much everyone I've seen accept a delivery from a robot is smiling.
Is it the novelty right now?
It's partly the novelty. Actually, one of the things that we did in the design of the robot, it used to be the first iteration, we would drive up to the door, deliver the thing, and then go back home. And people were complaining, I want more time to spend interacting with the robot. I want to go grab my camera and take a picture. So we actually built in a set of interactions onto the robot screen so that you can actually have that time to go grab your camera, take a selfie, you know, take some video with the robot, share it with your kids. And that's, you know, that we've been evolving the design to take into account how people are actually interacting with our product.
You need to socialize them too to make them more, people accept them a bit better.
Exactly, yeah.
So speaking about robots, you're making them more empathetic.
So I work at IBM on the Watson user team, actually a team that Tessa used to be a part of when it was back in research, and it got sort of pulled into the Watson fold because we have a lot of AI products that can be very useful for the world at large. And so what the team does is build models on people. So their personality, their emotional state, their needs, their values, and this is all from text. As opposed to having to fill out a 50-plus questionnaire, if you have someone's Twitter handle or some text that's been written by them that sort of is a more expressive text, then you can figure out who a person is. And this can come into play in a number of areas. There's this push now for personalization in terms of what Tessa's talking about to make. Technology is becoming so pervasive right now. We're seeing it in our cars, we're seeing it on our phones, and we're having conversations with this technology. And you want something to have a bit more of an emotional IQ. You want it to understand you, and you want to. I mean, if you have a conversation with someone who doesn't have an emotional IQ, or doesn't really understand you, it's not quite as satisfying. You're not going to want to go back to that. And so this will come into play into things such as robotics. And again, coming back to elderly care, robots that not just provide for the elderly some of the services that they help them out in the home, but also that can be sort of a social or emotional outlet for them. And being able to have robots that understand personality and emotion and be able to then emulate that in a way that makes sense is really important. And so that's a lot of what my team is working on. I can pass it along.
Ioana?
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there a way to code compassion into robots?
Well, it starts out with rules. And so if you start out by understanding what emotion people are displaying, and then we've been looking at conversations, mostly in the customer care domain, but successful conversations, where if someone is angry and you respond with a certain type of emotion or certain content, certain words that you're using, you have a more successful conversation with that person and a better outcome, a more positive outcome.
It almost sounds like some of the training and help people give to children with Asperger's or autism to help them navigate the world a little bit better, how to recognize facial cues, how to respond appropriately, how to know when people are making eye contact and things like that.
Those are all things we have to program into robots too.
Exactly. Ioana talking about outer space,
Yeah.
taking a wider view.
Yeah, so just a little bit about my trajectory, and the reason I wanted to start with that is because no matter where I am or what my title says, it's in the end, it's me, a woman who has very much the experiences of my life have shaped me for who I am. And so I grew up in communist Romania, and I was just sharing with my panelists here that when I was growing up, every summer I spent it on the farm, and I very much loved that connection with nature. And I didn't really see much technology, and I don't think anything inside of me has driven me towards technology. I think it was more curiosity that drove me through my life. I also understood, again, given the context, I felt many times that I was at a table, at a conversation. There's that cartoon that says a woman has a great idea, and then there's 4 other men, and then the guy who, let's say, is a project manager, tells people, "Oh, that's a brilliant idea. Would you please let John say it?" So I've always felt that that's really, really unfair to women. And inside of me, something that drove me, I was like, okay, I really need to build that through education. That's what drove me actually to get my PhD. I followed that path. So I left Romania. I did my PhD in the Netherlands in physics. And then in my third year of PhD, I was doing experiments, and I got frustrated at some point with just the nuts and bolts of it. And I'm like, well, I need to switch to computation. I was very curious of how matters behave at atomic level. So I switched to computational chemistry. I moved at Caltech. That was my first experience in the United States. It was a fascinating tool for me. That was probably my first falling in love with technology, right? When you go on a computer and you have all the atoms and it's your lab, you can create out of the computer a material or a biological system, and then you study its properties, and then you go and you say, well, how realistic is this? We work with a lot of industry projects, 3M, Chevron, a lot of biological applications as well. And so it's that fine-tuning. I think the speaker before was talking about how important it is to create not biased data sets, and I wish you would have emphasized more on that. It's really, really hard. Like we see it in the information out there. It's really hard to extract what is true information and what's garbage, right? At least from computer science, there's this thing that we call GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. If you put garbage in, no matter how good the program is, you're gonna get garbage out, right? So it's really, really important to make sure that what you feed into a computer or a robot or no matter what has that due diligence behind it so that what you get is really good quality information. And so filtering that, I think it's really, really hard work. And it boils down to, in my opinion, going to the philosophy of science on continuously questioning it, right? I have a hypothesis, I have some data. Yes, it would be really, really cool if I would go publish that and say, hey, I came up with this paper, but maybe I'm wrong. And so can I continuously question myself and let go of a certain hypothesis and explore more and let the path and the data drive versus the ego, right? So that goes back to emotional intelligence, right? Okay, so fast forward, I never wanted to work for NASA or at NASA. It just happened. Literally, I joined the Center for Nanotechnology on a project, and then that went away, and it was a scientist emerged in an engineering world. And I can tell you that engineers were looking like, what are you doing here? We're building this system who fly. What are you scientists doing here? So, I was like, okay, I need to understand the engineering side. And that actually drove me to a lot of flaws in the system and the space program, understanding that, in order to make things happen, you really have to have the science and technology, the economics and the market, and then the policies fall into place. And so talking about global problems, this is what we see at the global level. We have a lot of problems, a lot of countries in poverty and so on. We're so blessed here with technology. And we work in this blessed universe here, especially in California and Silicon Valley. But a lot of these things are completely disconnected to real people who suffer on a daily basis and who have absolutely no imagination that the tiniest bit that builds us, it's even possible, right? I mean, if I went to Saudi Arabia, invited there at Coast to give a talk, and I was talking about going on the moon, and I sounded like a nut. It freaked me out. I realized, how do I go and convey the value of it? Is it actually valuable? Should we go to space? What are we doing? So that brings me back to, we work with commercial space. So the space portal is the friendly front door to commercial space. And right now we see Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, who, again, built Amazon and made a profit so that he can invest in a space company. That's Blue Origin. His goal is to put hundreds of people to live and work in outer space. I question that in some ways. I mean, we have still a lot of global problems. Will that help us solve more or bring more problems down here on Earth? But I think it's very cool. I think we should explore that. We should definitely not let it go. Or Elon Musk. I think he's used IT business-savvy techniques in building SpaceX and bringing down the price to access to space fly often, fail often, learn from that, open that up. We're really seeing here a very, very strong move in space democratization. So we work with a lot of startups also to infuse technologies and cool ideas from out there, but also to spin off. And so, I want to hug them.
So, Cather is working in the ag tech space, 2 startups, and she comes to us from New Zealand.
New Zealand, yes. So my day job is actually, I'm a professor in physics and chemistry, and so maybe much more similar to Ioana in background. But in 2011, someone from the dairy industry came to visit me in my laser lab and said, there are 5 big problems facing New Zealand dairy, and can you help with any? And so we chose the one that was most physical, and that turns out to be sorting sperm by sex for the dairy industry. So starting in 2011, with a diagram on a sheet of paper, we started a company, which was quite extraordinary. I didn't expect that to happen. And we're now doing quite well. So we've just got through a $4.5 million fundraise. We're right at the last stage of commercialization. And if there's anyone out there who can give me advice on scale up, Engender was my first patent, my first spin-off company, and we're about to go pretty big. And it's a humongous business. It's also got a lot of positive impact. It's right along the line of what I think of as my value stream. So Engender is about giving farmers the ability to get more value out of their dairy herd. And when you think about more value out of your dairy herd, what you're really talking about is productivity. So you'd love to be able to raise the productivity of each animal without endangering the animal's health or well-being, and also without having all of that negative impact on the environment. So you look at a place like India, for example. There are more cows in India than there are anywhere else in the world, 45 million. It takes 3 Indian dairy cows to make the same amount of milk as 1 New Zealand dairy cow, and that's because of high tech. That's because of artificial insemination and all the high-tech breeding that's gone into that. And so if our technology can help give Indian children milk, it's one of the best sources of protein in India, with a vast reduction of the impact on the environment, then that's really fantastic. The other thing that draws me to this entrepreneurial space, and I really quite like it, is that my students all want to make a difference. That's been the biggest transformation that I've seen in my classes, and I teach thousands of students every year. They want to make a difference. And so part of my job, when I think about my products, yes, we're making sperm sorting chips, and we're putting these in, using lasers to sort them, and we're doing patents. Our second spin-off company is also in dairy. It's about every cow, every milking, so we call it point-of-cow diagnostics. So we're looking at composition in the dairy farm to give farmers the ability to tune their herds better, so look at what they're eating and so on. But it's the students. So one of my most important products are these entrepreneurial students. So one of the reasons that we spin off companies is so that they learn how to be entrepreneurial. They learn how to create businesses, to make their ideas real, and then take them out of the university. And so maybe that's where I'll stop.
Well, okay. So one thing that you mentioned was the robots and the elderly. What I'd like to know is that's the good side. On the bad side, or the peril, I would say, is sort of the labor dislocation. And that's one thing I think that needs to be considered whenever you're bringing a new technology, as Ioana said. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much any disruptive technology that we've seen throughout history has caused people to change jobs, right? I don't know how many people used to work in the telephone industry as switchboard operators, but we certainly don't need very many of those anymore. We definitely don't need any more horseboys or stablemen to take care of all the horses that we're bringing people around. So, every technology comes with a change. And I think robotics is no different. We're going to see a change in the way jobs are distributed across society. Actually, one of the things I think a lot about is driverless cars now. We're smack in the middle of Silicon Valley. It seems like every company is building some kind of a driverless car here. And if you think about how many people are going to be out of a job once we don't need taxi drivers, we don't need truck drivers, we don't need Uber or Lyft drivers, right? That's a huge number of people that are going to affect our society in serious ways. And so I think, my position is that I think we as a society need to think about what are we going to be doing for job retraining and for, sustaining the lifestyles of the people who are going to be part of this society moving forward. One of the things that we talked about in our pre-panel prep was the idea of moving higher up the value chain, right? You know, today a lot of the jobs that are being done by less skilled people are things like, you know, operating cars, operating machinery, and those are the kind of jobs that are tending to go away, being replaced by automation and more tech. And so I think that moves people higher up the value chain. You still cannot replace human intelligence with a computer yet, you know. Maybe Watson will get there someday. Maybe robots will. But
So maybe creating a sustainable base on the moon on Mars would solve some of that problem, no?
well, I mean, all of these things create more jobs, right? You know, we hire roboticists now, right, to actually build our robots and maintain them, as well as space. So I think that's part of it.
But the other thing is, so do we really need to contemplate that driver's car will replace everything? Because every technology has its place. It doesn't have to become an overwhelming, all-over implementation, right? It has a certain application that is most useful, right? It's like any medication. You have the benefits and the risks, and you take it when the risks are not higher than the benefits, right?
Well, I think we need to, you know, the previous speaker talked about man and machine, and I think we need to think more about this technology as augmenting what we can already do. And so you have, you know, if you come to the driverless car, you know, most of the time, you know, there are a lot of times when great, it's fine, conditions are good, you want the car to take care of things for you, you can check your email, do whatever else you're gonna do. Still paying attention, of course. But there are times when you're gonna wanna take over control. And I use the example, I like to go skiing. I still have a manual car because I don't want a computer deciding when to shift up and down if I'm on icy conditions. So, you know, you have this, you don't wanna think of, you know, necessarily artificial intelligence or just technology being completely automated. You're going to have us in the mix still, and you want more to think about it as enhancing what we can do.
You know, one of the things my kids laugh at me about is the fact that I fight with Siri. So
That's
Or
because she
with
has
Google.
no emotional IQ. Sorry, go ahead.
it's just, I was just saying that even Google Maps, I use Google Maps to guide me when I need it, if I need it. But if it starts telling me what to do, I really get annoyed about it. And I say, no, you don't know the best route, I know it. So it's really, I think we should contemplate of how much we let technology, we rely on technology. It is the easiest thing. Oh, you know, this is cool, it's here, let it tell me. But what if it's wrong? We still haven't proven that technology is always right? So I think we should still very much be in control and steering of our lives.
So,
Well, and I'll add that the idea of technology augmenting humans becomes really important when you start talking about non-OECD countries, you know, the developing world. So, you know, whether your robot has a good EQ or not is really a first world problem, right? When you're talking about places where there's no lighting that allows children to do their homework at night. And some of the solutions, the technology solutions in that space can be really powerful, even though they're not what we would necessarily call, you know, very high tech. You can bring a solar panel out that enables an entire village to charge their cell phone, and the woman who owns that solar panel and little post now has a source of income and can buy a cow. And that's another way that technology can have a significant global impact.
That reminds me when I was talking to Anna about, okay, how does technology align with global problems, solve global problems? So I've watched this movie recently, Time to Choose, by Charles Ferguson. I advise you to watch it as well. It's really, really a powerful movie, and it shows what kind images from global problems, right? From mountain mining, what did that do to the environment, to oil and gas industry all over the world, whether you talk about Indonesia or ever. But then it also ends up on a positive note, and one of the examples were solar panels, where in African countries, right, unless you can afford to buy a canister of gas or whatever
Kerosene.
it is.
It's
There you go.
kerosene.
Thank you, kerosene. You don't have the means to have electricity. And so making solar panel affordable actually not only allowed to power their own house, but the children had access. They could afford to have a computer and had access to information and education through that computer. I think that's a really powerful example of technology.
And I think a lot of the technology that we've been hearing about, artificial intelligence and so on, and robotics, they really can have a positive impact. It just somehow is in a slightly different way. So I was in Abu Dhabi last week at a global forum on agriculture innovation, and one of the new startups I saw there that was so exciting is using a non-internet-based way to connect small farmers. So the example they gave was a farmer in Kenya who's growing tea. There's a new pathogen that's come in, and he has no idea what to do about it. So he goes with his cell phone, everybody's got cell phones now, and just texts something about it, and that is connected with a farmer in Uganda. Now, he would never have access to that resource, but that's a use of artificial intelligence and the type of Uber connectivity that we talk about all the time here in Silicon Valley that's really transforming the way this guy, it's tripled his yield in tea leaves in 1 year. It's just amazing. I have goosebumps.
So I want to bring it back to the first world and talk a little bit about what we think of as really interesting in robotics, which is elder care. We mentioned this a little bit in the intros. One of the things that I'm excited about the potential for robotics to help with is the elder care crisis. You know, we all know people are getting older, not enough young people are coming up, and even the young people who are growing up don't want to necessarily be caregivers for the old. It's not a sexy job, you know? No one wants to do this work.
Not just that, but there aren't enough younger people. You know, the workforce, is decreasing in size because we have this, you know, and the baby boomers are basically moving up in the population pyramid, and we're just not going to have the workers there to be able to take care of them. It's going to be a serious problem.
And on
and
top of that, when you're caring for your elders is when you're right at the peak of your own career. And so it's often not, you know, there's a lot of tension there.
Exactly.
You also have kids to take care of.
Yep. And women entering the workforce. So there are all these problems now coming into play.
So what do we do about it?
Yeah.
What do we do about it?
We build
That's right.
robots. So, I mean, here's the thing, right? Robots and automation in general, I think one of the things that I've seen is true of seniors and people who are starting to decrease in functionality and not be able to take care of themselves is that you don't want someone else to take care of you. And that's where automation and robots is really powerful, because I know when I get old, I'd rather have a robot caregiver than a human caregiver, because it feels like I'm helping myself rather than having someone else help me. And there's a lot of power in the ability to be able to do that.
I was going to say independence is really important for seniors, and then being able to stay in their homes, and having a robotic, a care bot in your home with you, just it improves your quality of life, and you can stay in the home much longer. So
you know what's funny? There's a Canadian comedian, Norman, and I forgot the last name. But when I think of robots, I think of one of his really funny pieces where he had this machine and it was feeding him, and it had like a little thing to even wipe his mouth and so on. And at some point, that machine breaks, and it starts slapping him and kicking him and so on. So I thought, I still have that. It's a movie from the 80s, right? So what if a robot that, you know, with all the EQ and IQ and so on, at some point breaks and you have no control, and it's like, okay, how do I stop it? I can't unplug it. What do I do with it, right?
I hope we'll have worked out the bugs by then.
So on that note, one last question. What is the biggest challenge that you want to see solved?
Anyone want to go first on that one?
I'll go first. So I would like to see everyone in the world be able to have enough food to survive without destroying our environment.
I want everybody in the world to care about the planet, to think of this planet that it's our only home. It's not about a country or another. It's the only home we know between the stars. And to really go about it in a very kind and peaceful manner.
it's a tough question. It's something to do with healthcare. It's such a big issue now, and as we've been talking about, you know, I'll be briefly, is the aging population and making healthcare, through the use of technology, AI, and whatnot, more accessible and more cost effective. I think is a really serious issue for a lot of people, especially with what's going on right now.
Wow. I think everything everyone else said. Plus, I think one of the things I think is a big problem in society today is wealth inequality. And I would love to see us move towards a society where everyone has the right to live out their life and seek happiness and fulfillment in a way that doesn't impact anyone else, but allows more overall happiness for the human race.
So on behalf of Silicon Valley Forum, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next year.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.